walk with people in suffering. Walk with ladies that are suffering. Just recently, I got to be with a friend of mine in her final days. She was dying from cancer. And as scary as that can be for me, because my fears of the
Mhm.
enemy will torment me, the things I'm afraid of, I would
Yeah.
not miss that moment to be there with her. It was such an honor. There's just something beautiful about people, women, or anybody letting you in that space, letting you in their suffering. Don't miss that opportunity. Don't be afraid of it.
Welcome to another episode of the Juggling Life Finding Balance podcast. I'm your host, Vivian Cummins, and today I want to introduce you to Brooke Tilghman. You may know her from cheering backstage for her husband, Todd, who became the season 18 winner of The Voice. Brooke is a powerhouse. She's on fire for God and truly an inspiration. She's the wife to Todd, mother to 8 children, a gifted thrifter, and a woman who loves people, community, and being authentically the way God made her. She also co-authored a book with her husband called Every Little Win: How Celebrating Small Victories Can Lead to Big Joy. In this episode, Brooke shares some of the details of her life prior to Todd winning The Voice, and she reminds all of us that God can and does use those who live ordinary lives to do amazing things. You cannot afford to miss this one, so let's get started. Welcome, Brooke. How are you today?
I'm great.
Oh, it
Excited.
is such a pleasure for me to have you here. First of all, for me to get to know you. I met your husband a couple years back at a writers' conference, and now I get to meet you. And so I'm super excited to have you here today.
Same. I am so excited. I love to talk, so this is going to be fun.
It is going to be so fun. We had the opportunity to do kind of like a little meet and greet, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, and I'm just like, "Oh my gosh, that's my soul sister. How are we going to get through this podcast and stay on
Right,
track?
and
I
both
don't
of us
know."
be able to talk, right?
But thank you for coming on, and we're going to be talking about something that I really think is important for women to know, and that is how God chooses just ordinary, authentic, and available people to do extraordinary things. And you and your husband and your family, y'all are an example of that. But before we get into your story, I would love for you to share a little bit about yourself.
I am a stay-at-home mom to 8. I love the word extraordinary. I use it for my kids. Extraordinary children. 3 have flown the nest, so we have 5 still at home. We have 2 dogs, and I have a bunch. I tend to say I like to collect kids, dogs, shoes, books. Those are my things, and like memes. I like memes. I don't even know if that's the correct way to say it, but like memes you find on like Facebook, social media, funny memes. So those are the things I collect. I went gray early, so I decided to rock that. So that's another thing that like a lot of people ask me about. I'm a thrifter. I used to be a yard sailor when I was younger because my parents were. Now I love the world of thrifting. It's just my therapy. I love Jesus. I love being authentic. I wish more women would just be authentic and just that I want there to be a space for women to feel that they can be safe to be authentic and take the mask off and kind of just be themselves. So, that's a little bit about me. I'm married to Todd. We've been married 26 years, a long time. We got married early. We jokingly say that he wanted 2 kids, I wanted 3, so we compromised on 8. So
Great compromise.
yeah, I don't know how that worked. The Lord is in the story.
I love it. And we've used the word authentic a couple of times this morning, and I'm like, that is what draws me to you. That's what draws me to you and your husband is just how authentic you are and how down to earth you are. And I agree. I think so many times, women especially, we try to be something that we're not. We want to look like everybody else. We want to act like everybody else, and I love the fact that you said, I went gray early and I've just embraced it. And it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. It's who you are, it's who God made you to be. And that's just one of the many things I love about you.
Thank you. I do feel the connection. I feel that we have kindred spirits. when it comes to
Yes.
authenticity and our personality.
Yes, yes. Well, we're going to get into this is part one. This will be a two-part series episode, and what I want to talk to you about today, in addition to the previous topic of authenticity, is kind of your story pre the voice. So many people know that you and your family, well, your husband was the season 18 winner of the singing competition, The Voice. And some may know you because you guys have also written a book with our dear friend Trisha Goyer. And I'm going to put this on camera so everybody can see it. Whoops. You
Trisha
see
is the
that?
best.
Oh,
I
Trisha
gotta
is
shout her
amazing.
out. She's
She is amazing.
amazing.
The book is called Every Little Win: How Celebrating Small Victories Can Lead to Big Joy. So, before we kind of get into some of the other things, tell me how you guys came to write this book with Trisha.
Um, After The Voice, I think Trisha watched it. She's a big fan of The Voice, and she's just started reaching out on Facebook to different people. She's like, "Does anybody know his wife? Does anybody know how to get in contact with her? I think she would do I want her to do a podcast." And, so finally someone reached out to me, got us in contact, and we did this podcast in the same way. Me and her just had this very kindred type spirit, and she's like, "You know what? Like, the more we talk," she's like, "I think you guys it would be a great book." And so it wasn't on our radar. I'm like, "Who wants to hear about I mean, you know what I mean? Like, and she was just like, "No." Like, and so she kinda got the ball rolling. And I think the biggest thing for us was we wanted people to see, because I know everybody hears about The Voice, and that's a big deal, but really, it's really all the other parts of our story along the way. God used The Voice and that big of a thing to kind of in a lot of different ways in our life, propel us to a different I mean, it just opened doors, but it also in a season, I think it was the push Todd needed to step outside of something he was already feeling. So, but it's really more about all the other just everyday, ordinary and some not ordinary, moments and wins that people needed to hear about. That's what was important to us. You know, we didn't want it to be about winning the voice. We want it to be about because that's not really that relatable, to be honest.
Right.
I mean, how
Right.
many
How
people are
many
gonna
of
win
us
the
are
voice?
actually
Right.
contestants or
I mean,
winners?
he's still the oldest winner. He wants to,
Yeah.
like, lose that title, but, so it's not like a ton of people our age or it just isn't to me, that wouldn't be the relatable part of our story. That would just be
Mhm.
what God used to put us on people's radar, and I wanted to take that opportunity and get people to know, "Hey, we're just like y'all. Like, we have problems, we have struggles, we've had victories, we've had failures." I love hearing people's story. That's my favorite thing, and my favorite thing well, one of my favorite things, there's so many favorite things about Jesus, but is he redeems our stories, and I don't know, so it's like I always connect with people when I can hear their stories, so to me, I just wanted to share our story as authentically as possible,
Yeah. I
and
I love
Trisha
that.
made that happen.
She did, and so I've known Trisha for about 3 or 4 years now. We met at a writers conference. She started off as being a an instructor for a class that I took online, and then met her at the writers conference and stuff. Anyways, one of the things she was telling me is you've got to meet Brooke, and so she told me that when she was watching The Voice, she watched you like the scenes where you're backstage and stuff, and she's like there's just something about her that drew her to you. And that's kind of what led her to try to, track y'all down and write your story. So I definitely think that was a divine intervention for God. To bring all of us together because you're right. The stories are what's important. That's how we lead others to know Christ is by sharing our stories and our testimonies. And what a great way to do it by being on Trisha's podcast and also this book.
Yes.
So in the book, I, I love the storytelling and the way that it's designed. It's like here's Todd's side of the story, here's Brooke's side of the story, and it just kind of goes back and forth, and you each tell different stories. I would love for you, if you wouldn't mind, to introduce our audience. First of all, how you and Todd met.
We met in church, actually. The church that his dad started pastoring, I had previously went to, so we heard there was a new pastor. We came back and visited, and I actually became really good friends with his sister, and we began hanging out because I'm 2 years younger than Todd, and his sister was younger, and so I started just being a fixture around their house, I guess, with his sister, and we were close, and we just kind of developed this camaraderie, and, and at first, honestly, he liked me, I didn't really like him because it was more like it's my friend's older
Friend's
brother,
brother. Yeah,
but
ew.
all that changed when, one of his previous girlfriends come down from where the church they were at before, and I was used to getting all the attention when I was there. It was like and I was like, "Wait a minute, maybe I do like him. Like,
Uh-oh.
why does this bother me? Why is it like" I'm like, he should be giving me attention. This is what I'm used to when I'm over at the house." So that kind of pushed me in that direction. So yeah, we met in church. That's kinda how it started.
I love it. I love it. And then Todd was called to be a pastor.
Yes.
And so, what did you think of that calling once you
You
guys got
know,
married, what did you think about being a pastor's wife?
I'll be honest, I had been in church my whole life. That's kind of been like, and so it didn't scare me. I definitely saw God's hand on Todd's life, and I knew that God had big things for him. I will say I didn't feel like I fit the mold of a pastor's wife at all. I don't sing. Like back in the day, it was like you had to sing, play the piano. I'm not quiet, I'm not I was a big
No.
personality, I was out there. I do things sometimes for shock value, just for fun, I don't know, like and so I told the Lord that, and I felt like the Lord kinda just impressed upon me that, "Brooke, you have to be you as a pastor's wife," and I guess that's the best advice I ever got from the Lord. Not the best ever, but just in that moment, he really was just, again, authenticity. He was like, "You can't be like" I looked at other women that were pastors' wives, and I didn't fit that mold, and that was fine. They did, but I felt like I couldn't because I didn't fit that certain I didn't feel like, "Oh, I'm not gonna be a very good pastor's wife," and the Lord just really said, "You have to be you as a pastor's wife," and I think if I didn't start out that way, I would have been in trouble. I really felt like and our church family had a lot of grace with me, and they let me be me, and in turn, that was the best thing ever for me. But I was scared that I wouldn't fit the mold, you know?
He pairs us with the right people,
He does.
and he doesn't want us to change our personalities. He gave us these personalities,
Right,
right?
right.
Be
Yeah, my
yourself.
husband actually wrote a song, that's literally talking about, like, when let me see how we word this. He always jokes and says, like, "I'm the gas, he's the brakes." I tend to say, like, I will jump off the cliff, but he's kinda like the grace that helps me when I go too far. But the song is actually, she speaks to mountains, but I grab a shovel, because it's kind of like I'm a faith person too. I'm like, "Big faith, let's just run off this cliff. I'm gonna speak to this mountain." He's like, "I'm gonna grab a shovel and, like, dig us out." But together we take care of it, and so I feel like God puts that together. I stretch him. There's a lot of things we would have never done in life if it wasn't for me, but also we would have embarrassed the mess out of ourselves if it was just me, all the decisions. But I literally had a woman pray for me at church one time because I felt like she was super submissive and I needed that. So I totally relate to you. It's hard. I mean, I had my dad, I love him to death, but growing up, he was a little more of a controlling type. And so I think I just buck that. Like,
Uh,
I don't wanna
that's
be
how I grew up
controlled.
too.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
so, and I know my dad did it in a way because he loved me so much and he didn't want me to make and I know it come from his environment growing up. But it did make me kind of say, "Nope,
Re
not gonna be
rebellious?
controlled."
I feel like it's a little bit of rebellion, but it also for me, not I'm not saying you're rebellious,
No, no,
but
no,
for
I agree.
me, I felt like it was a little bit of
Excuse me.
rebellion, but that early, kinda controlling spirit is kinda what who made me how I am today,
Yeah.
and some of the independence and stuff has served me well, so God uses it all, right?
He does, he does,
He
he
uses it
does.
all.
Hey, it's part of our story, that's the thing, all the
Yep,
parts of our story. The
yep,
ugly, the pretty, he uses all of it,
all of it.
and I just feel like you have to own your story, the good, the
Mhm.
bad, and that's because that's what makes you who you are. I mean, that's the
Yeah,
journey, you know? So
I agree. I agree. Now, you talk in your book about how your marriage to Todd almost didn't make it. So,
Mhm.
what can you share with us about that? And what was going on in your heart and mind at that time?
For me, it was it was about 2 years in our marriage, and honestly, I think that I fed into this fantasy of almost like romance movies and how marriage should be. And when I didn't feel that way all of a sudden all the time, I thought something was missing. I thought the grass was greener. I thought I got married young. I had all these I was hanging out with people that were single. So I just thought, you know what? Me and Todd are great friends, but maybe this isn't, maybe I don't feel like so in love like I should. I fed into a lie that the enemy fed me and that the society feeds you, that it's like this, and marriage is a wonderful thing, but it's hard work and it's not easy all the time. And I think if more people would be authentic and not put on, airs, like it would be easier to have these conversations. I was young and, we were in ministry and everything's just supposed to be perfect. And I just was like, I want out. Like I made a mistake. I knew no one would ever love me like Todd. I knew that. But I thought he deserves somebody like that. Or I want to feel that way. Like, what's wrong with me? Um, so that was really kind of what led into it. I mean, immaturity on my part. Um, you know, just I don't know, and listening to the wrong voices, listening to people you got married too young. You need to sow your wild oats. You didn't experience dating a ton of people, all these things. And I was listening to it at work and just all different places. And it was just feeding that lie. Um, and I just, you know, I think that's just it was a lie of the enemy that I believed, and I fed that. I chose to listen to those voices instead of, the voice of truth, and that's really what started it, and it was just kind of a snowball, you know, thing that kind of went from there, and, um, ultimately, I mean, ultimately, God got a hold of me. Clearly, we know this because,
You're
here we
still
are, but
together.
yes, but, it was definitely a scary time. I look back now and see all that the enemy was after.
Right.
It wasn't just our marriage. I mean, just us destroying us. It was like, look at all this story that would have never
Yeah,
happened.
he knew what powerhouses you guys were gonna be in the future. So,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
I think that
How
was his
long
goal.
how long were you kinda in the season? First of all, how old were you when you got married? What, 18,
I was
19?
18. Yeah,
18. I was
yeah.
19 the first time. That's young. I remember, so my husband now, he got married when he was just turned 18 the first time, and I had
Mhm.
just turned 19 the first time. But then when our kids turned 18 and 19, we were like, "There's no way
I
that
know, I
they could
know.
ever get married," you know?
I think about that all the time now. I've got girls that are well, I've got kids. I mean, my oldest son just got married, but he didn't get married till he was 25. And I
Mhm.
had like 3 kids at 25. Like, it's crazy when I
Yeah.
think about it. And then some of my girls, like, they're 16. I'm like, I was getting married in 2 years. Like,
Oh
it's
my gosh.
crazy.
I
I'm like,
know.
what was I thinking? But it worked. The
Yeah.
Lord's good.
Yeah.
He's good.
He's good. How long did that season of, I don't wanna be married, there's gotta be more, I don't wanna do this, how long did that season last for you?
Um, I think, I got married at 18. We had Egan, my first son, 19 when I almost turned 20. And I think it really amped up after that. I think it was just a lot of craziness going on, getting married, being so young, finances, church, have a baby. It was just a lot. And so I think it kind of, probably a little, I mean, your hormones, all that rolled in. And I didn't, yeah. And like I said, I was feeding the wrong voices. I was going to people I knew would kind
Ugh.
of
Tell you
like,
what you wanted to hear?
yeah, feed that, "Oh, you just need to get out and start over, you're so young." And I think I just was a lot going on, and,
Mhm.
ministry is a lot, And, he was having to do a lot, and he loved me so much, he let me kinda do my own thing because I wanted to. He would let me go out and hang out with some of my single friends, which he probably not that he can let me, but it probably should've I think he was just afraid. He knew something was up with me, and I think he was just letting me do what I wanted to do. So I really think it probably went on for probably a good year or so. And I fed into a lot of fantasy and I began to fantasize what my life could be like, you know, instead of making what I had amazing. I tend to, and that's something even as my marriage has went on, I have to work on. I can tend to fantasize, which is why I like to do great big things because this is how it's going to be and it's going to be so amazing. And instead of just doing the hard work and disciplining myself to make what I have great. You have this fantasy of how it's gonna be to be a mother, how it's gonna be to be a wife. And what happens is nothing can live up to fantasy because fantasy is the perfect ideal and nothing is that way. And so we tend to, and I got wrapped up in that. And I think a lot of times it's fed by a narrative, like even women, the way we look, we look at these perfect images that are cultivated and curated and made to look a certain way when that's not even really the truth. But it's the same way with marriages. We look at stories and romance and these movies and it's just, and I think it's like, again, it's just, I think for me, it was just this I'm wanting something and taking the easy way, or I thought, "Oh, well, I'll just," I mean, it really was all on me. Now there's things I feel like Todd should have stepped up and probably recognized and been more of the spiritual leader there, but we were young.
I was gonna say, he was young
He
too.
was young and
Yeah.
he was sensing out, I don't think he wanted to lose me. And
Yeah.
so I think he was kind of letting me have my way a lot of things, and it was just, and I just, but at the same time, it's like I said, it's like I remember crying to my mom's pastor, like, I feel like I need to leave because I don't feel like I'm happy, but I also know no one's ever gonna love me like he loves me. And I just knew that. So it was just this very tough season that probably went on a year, year and a half. Um, some of it he didn't know. I'm sure he sensed, but I kept it to myself. Like, and when I finally we had this fight and we just kind of I was like, it was kind of like he's like, okay, if you're gonna do this or whatever, I wasn't even really planning on doing it like right then. But I took my moment to be like, okay, yeah, I want out. And he was literally like, "Okay, if you wanna leave, we gotta go talk to my parents," which I was deathly afraid of doing. I mean, I love his parents, but if you know his mom, like, I mean, and plus I disappoint I really looked up to them and I just kept telling myself, I remember, "Once I get out of here, I'm good." Like, I'm done, and I was working, he was working. My mom watched our oldest son, Egan, part of the time, and then his mom did, so it was like this kind of weird dynamic. So when it happened, it was like had consulted lawyers and they had told me, you need to keep him, Egan with you. And it was like this weird. So my mom almost had to hide it. It was an awful, awful season. I felt terrible. I'm like, what am I doing? But at the same time, I thought if I could just get through this, then God's going to forgive me and then I'm going to find the perfect love that I dreamed of. And it's all going to be this perfect, like little fairy tale, which is ridiculous. But that's what I was feeding into, that the Lord loves me and he wanted me happy, and I'm like, "Look, this," I mean, I was listening to the enemy, you know, um, 'cause yeah, so that's basically how it kind of went down, um,
And
and
you
I
mentioned that God got a hold of you, and,
Mhm.
you mention it in the book, and you talk a lot about that in the book. We'll let those who are listening and watching get the book so they can hear how
Yes!
God transformed that situation. But I would love if you could, those who might be listening or watching, maybe they're in a marriage that they're like, "You know what? I just want out. I've been waiting for that moment. As soon as I get my like you said, I'm gonna take my moment, I'm gonna go."
Mhm.
What advice do you have for that woman who feels like maybe her marriage is too far gone and she wants out?
Again, I just wanna say, that's what Jesus does. He redeems our stories. He can take what is a mess if we give it to him. I always find that, you know, when we're in pain, if we can allow Jesus into that, there's purpose in that. He's writing our story. And for me, it was just finally giving it to him. I can really remember the moment people were praying for me, and I wanted to hold on to, I wanna leave because I was selfish. But something inside me, I could almost feel it come up, and I just let it go, and I said, "Okay, God, if you want me in this marriage, I don't know how you're gonna fix this, but I'm gonna give it to you." And I knew in that moment, and I actually told Todd that night, I said, "I don't feel any different." Like, but I made a choice to give it to the Lord, and it wasn't perfect overnight, but over time, God has redeemed that part of our story. I'm more in love with Todd than I've ever been. I would have completely destroyed my life if I would have listened to the enemy. I mean, there's hope. There's people out there that will, link up with you. And if you're just in and I'm never promoting, if you're in a abusive situation, by all means, get help, get out. But for most marriages, I'm going to tell you, like, there was a study I read one time in a magazine. It wasn't even a Christian magazine. And it was the upwards of like 80% of people literally wished, outside of abusive situation, that they would have just stayed married to their first spouse. They would have just worked it out. It doesn't get easier. So there's hope. There's hope in Jesus. Like, he is the truth. He is the door. He is the answer. And honestly, just giving it, like taking your hands off of it. I love the picture of being open handed with Jesus. It's yours. Do with it what you want. And he made a better story out of my marriage and my life than I ever could have. But I had to let go of that control. And I think it's hard sometimes. I think we hold on to control because we don't want to be hurt or we're scared of the outcome. But just giving him that sovereignty in your life and saying, okay, God, you know, you're not meant to carry that weight, of your marriage falling apart. That put that on Jesus and say, okay, I'm just here. I am submitted to what you want me to do, and just there's always hope. There's always hope. That's the way I look at it. And so just give it to the Lord and watch what he does. My husband likes to say, if you give God a chance to blow your mind, watch him. Like,
Oh,
he will blow
that's
your mind,
perfect
you
advice.
know.
Perfect advice. Thank you so much for sharing that. You are so open with your struggles that you have faced with fear and
Mhm.
anxiety and even depression. So,
Uh-huh.
how far back does all of that go, and what can you share with us about that struggle?
Well, it goes way back to when I
Mm.
was a small child. I remember I would just have these fears. It started not with my health. That's a big one from me later on, but it started more with almost it'd be like, you don't really believe in Jesus, or just the worst things, like, and I'd be terrified. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And then it was like my mind would be like, why did you think that then? And then it would be this tormenting. And so and I kind of hid it because you feel embarrassed when you struggle with stuff like that. And so, I'm a prayer person. I love to pray. So I would pray a lot, even as a kid, to try to, like, help my anxiety. And it was something that I pretty much battled my whole life. I tend to say it would cycle. There'd be cycles. It's always there, but there'd be times that it was more prevalent. And then there would be times where I could handle it better, but it was just this constant battle I had, and as I got older, it began to step into, because it's always worst case scenarios. Most of my life, I did not share. I finally opened up with my husband, um, and just shared, because it would just be whatever the enemy would torment you. You're going to hurt your kids. You're going to do, like, whatever the worst case. Then it became health. Any little mole I had, and yeah, because I'm a freckly person, but so that was always been a big fear of mine. So I've always overwatched every mole, but it got to the point where one time my husband, like, come in, I was in the bathroom, and I had literally put bruises all over my body, checking for lumps and bumps, and just it was horrific. And I literally remember crying out I was in my closet, walk-in closet, and I said, "God, I want freedom. I want to be free." And it was right after that I walked into the worst season ever. And I remember asking Lord in the middle of that, "I asked you for freedom. What are you doing?" Like, and and he was like, "Yeah, you asked for freedom, Brooke, but what you wanted was relief. And if I just give you relief, you're not gonna know how to battle this. You're not gonna get true freedom. Freedom's costly. It's not." And And if I wouldn't have walked through that season of 2 years of literally I was almost committed, um, I would not be where I'm at today. I would not be able to battle. I would not be able to help other people. It was the first time that I actually talked about it publicly and with church people. I even had people tell me, "Brooke, don't share that. They're gonna use it against you." I mean, but that was the enemy told me, "If you share what you're thinking, these thoughts, no one will ever let you pray for them. You will never be able to be used in the church." That was such a lie to isolate me because the moment I started sharing the truth and the authenticity of what I was going through, that was the moment that the enemy couldn't shame me anymore. When I walked through suffering, there was a couple times in my life, people don't like to walk with you in suffering. I think they almost think it's contagious, or maybe it reminds them they might have to suffer. It makes people uncomfortable. I kind of encourage ladies out there to walk with people in suffering. Walk with ladies that are suffering. Just recently, I got to, be with a friend of mine in her final days. She was dying from cancer, and as scary as that can be for me because my fears of the enemy will torment me, the things I'm afraid of, I would not miss that moment to be there with her. It was such an honor. There's just something beautiful about people, women, or anybody letting you in that space, letting you in their suffering. Don't miss that opportunity. Don't be afraid of it.
That is
It's,
great
you know
advice. That is such great advice. And you know what? You're right. There's been times when I have purposefully separated myself from someone because I'll just give an example. I worked with a girl whose husband passed away with cancer, and then her son took his own life like shortly after that. And I found myself not being able to be around her because I was like, I don't know what I would do if my husband passed. I don't know what I would do if something like that happened to my children. And I did find myself separating from her because of my own fear and anxiety of that maybe happening to me. And so yeah. I mean, it reminds you of your mortality and that, things happen even to good people and stuff. But I think that is such beautiful advice to remind folks to walk along with those who are suffering. We're called to do that, by the way. And yeah, I had a situation. Mine, well, I have fear and anxiety. It's in the background, but my main thing was burnout, over committing, overdoing, and that all stems from, you know, perfectionism and control and not thinking you're enough. And so that's a whole nother topic. But there was a time about 5 years ago where I was kind of in that same thing. I can't take this anymore. And I surrendered and I uttered the words to God while I was face planted in my living room floor. I'm all in. Just change me, do whatever you have to do. And when we finally surrender, and I have a book coming out soon too, and I mentioned this that be ready. Don't utter those words unless you are ready to battle because you're going to get tested in that. And I remember after saying, I'm all in, do whatever you have to do to rid me of all of these things, and I got cancer myself. And so that was one of those things where, I came down with melanoma, and it was a very scary season. And I had to trust God that. So when they found it, I had a spot on my leg for 2 years, and I was originally told it was nothing. And then I went back to a dermatologist for something else, and then that's when he biopsied it and said it came back as stage 3. They had already said we believe it has already spread to your organs. We're sending you to the Cancer Institute. And so I'm thinking, this is it. And really had to trust God with the outcome. No matter what it is, it was going to be okay. And that was my first test. Then so many came after that. I mean, not only was my health attacked in so many different ways. I mean, I got shingles. Was having heart problems, and then my parents were getting afflicted with things, and then my husband's work was. It's just all of these things that I had no control over were happening, and I had to learn to trust God with all of it. And that was probably the absolute worst part of my life, but I would not trade it for anything because it it just it just brought me so close to God, and I'd never felt that close to him. I started having dreams where he would visit me in my dreams. I started discerning his voice. I started hearing him. And so I mean, how could I say that I regret going through that? I can't.
Right,
Even though
right,
it was hell on earth for
right.
a
Don't wanna
while,
do it again, but,
I would
like,
yeah, I don't want to do it again, but
but
I
I
would.
wouldn't trade it. Yeah,
But I will
because it
also say, before we leave this topic, that having come out of that, I mean, I also went through a season of spiritual warfare after the wilderness. Um, Having gone through all of that, I I did grow closer to God. I can hear and discern his voice, but I don't have the God winks that I got during those seasons. Like he showed out tremendous ways back then. And now that I've gotten through that, I'm kind of like, hey God, I kind of missing that
yeah.
or
I
whatever.
love that you call it God winks because I do too. I'm glad I found somebody
Yes.
else that those little things that you know are for God, specifically for you, to speak to
Mm-hmm.
you, and yeah, because He doesn't leave us alone even in those
No,
battles. He
no.
doesn't. He
He
comes with
shows
us.
up.
He shows up, and that's the craziest thing, like, some of those places, I'm like, "Oh my god, they were so hard." I don't even know how I did it, but literally God still showed up and gave me these moments that were like, "Oh my gosh." Like, yeah, because he's close to the brokenhearted. I mean, and if we suffer with him, we'll reign with him. Like, I remember, like, specifically listening to a song by Shane and Shane, "Though You Slay Me," in that season, and the version I listened to had an expert excerpt. I mean, I make up words. And,
We know what you mean.
yeah, you know what we mean. And it had that in there from John Piper on a message on suffering, and I don't think a lot of people preach on suffering. And when I listened to that over and over, just that little small part, then I found the whole sermon, and it ministered to me so much because I do think it's one of those things people just don't wanna talk about. Like, it's almost like you suffer alone, and I don't know, like, I just wanna, like but it I never felt so close to God, though, like, in that, like, and he knows what that feels like. He suffered, like, and I don't know, but it just I don't know, that season of life, like, I came out of it, my anointing was different. My I was a different person. Like, it's almost one of those things where I can be like, "This is before that, and this is after that." It's one of those life-altering type situations, and I can imagine that was for you. But
It
yeah,
really
it's
was. And I think that it prepared me for the calling and the purpose and the plans that he has
Mhm,
had and has for my life.
absolutely.
Just like you said, you now are using that experience um through the platforms that God has opened for you to be able to
Mhm.
help other people. And I think he's doing that same thing for me too. And I'm a firm believer that God uses everything to our betterment and to his glory, and also to
Mhm.
prepare us for what he has
It doesn't
planned
waste
for
anything.
us.
It doesn't waste anything. So
He
whatever you're
doesn't waste a
walking through
thing.
today, whatever you're
Yeah.
going through, it won't be wasted with God. He doesn't waste your
Yeah.
pain. He doesn't waste your brokenness. He doesn't waste it. Your bad decisions, he doesn't waste them. He will
He
use them.
doesn't. He doesn't. There's another thing that I want to bring up. It's mentioned in your book. Speaking of how God uses everything, um, this is kind of a cute story, but it was kind of caused a little bit of controversy with your family,
Yeah.
and it was it was when your firstborn, I believe, Egan,
Yes.
where he did something that went viral, and
Mhm.
I'm wondering if you'll share that story with us and your thoughts about how that particular incident may have started to prepare you guys for Todd and The Voice.
Yeah, he's my super duper creative child. He's actually out in LA now, like you.
Mhm.
And well, you're in California, you're not in
I'm
LA.
in
He's
Cal.
in
I'm not
LA.
in LA. I'm on the north side.
It's almost like people start thinking, if you're in California, you're in LA. Like
Yeah,
everybody's like LA takes over the
California's
whole
really big.
yeah. So, but he's out in that area now. He's super creative. So when he was younger, he cosplayed, dressed up all of his siblings because we have a ton of them. And he just whatever, like the range. I mean, he did Mulan, he did the Joker, he did he did I dressed up as Mary Poppins. I got Mary Poppins and then I did, oh gosh, Maleficent. So those are the 2 I got to do, yeah. So he just was all we just did it. It was fun. he would grab stuff around the house. I was at the thrifter, so whatever I would find, I would know, "Ethan can use this." So he was always doing that. So it was literally, it was just an outlet for him and his creativity, and so we didn't think much about it. He dressed up. Had the new It movie was coming out, and Stephen King, and so I mean, he dressed Louis up, 3 years old, as Pennywise, and he took some pictures and didn't realize that it was gonna blow. It blew up, went completely viral. He had all these interviews, even ended up the studio that did the movie got him to come out there with Louis, and Todd went out there. So it was wild. Definitely prepared us for people having opinions. I didn't realize so many people would have opinions on my parenting and on, and they just didn't know our life story. They didn't know how we lived. They didn't know Egan. And I know Todd growing up was very hindered. Todd's very creative. And if he didn't draw everything had to be like Jesus or Christian or, character, or he couldn't draw it. Like, and I'm not saying, I'm just saying we just decided to give our kids more freedom. Because, even when you look at creativity, like the the villains are more layered because they get backstory. They have problems like the rest of us. Like the princesses are perfect, or the good people don't have problems. So it's like funner to do the villains, and they're more interesting. And so we gave freedom in that, and a lot of people had a problem with that. A lot of people had a problem that our child was on railroad tracks. I mean, we were getting it was crazy,
And the
and
character It, can you for people who may not know, what who is that character? What is that
like,
character?
it is like it's like a clown, like a killer clown. I know
A
that
killer
sounds so
clown,
yeah,
okay.
yeah, it doesn't, and now like, Louis wasn't watching the movie, he was just dressing up
Yeah.
for Egan, he didn't know,
Yeah,
which is what
yeah,
he always
he
did,
didn't know.
and I was like, "Look at the other characters, we've done a lot of basic fun, like, it ain't all," but but and I get people's concern, but it's like, if you like, that's the thing, if you sometimes people make judgment calls when you don't like, to me, I feel like Todd says this, my husband says this all the time, like, accountability outside a relationship is judgment because a lot of times when you don't know people and you make you try to hold this accountability when you don't know their situation, their life, or what they're doing. It just that becomes judgment, and it also doesn't work. You got to have a relationship with people to speak into their lives and maybe hold them accountable. If you don't know someone, you can't really hold them accountable. So it was a learning curve. I learned I'm always going to be open and I'm not gonna change that, but you do learn. But yeah, it definitely prepared us for the wildness of being out there in the public.
Being out there in the public.
Mhm.
And we're going to talk in part two of this episode what things were like prior to
Yes.
Todd auditioning for The Voice and then your life after that. So, thank you so much, Brooke, for
You're
sharing with
welcome.
our audience a little bit about yourself, your family, and your life. But before we go, I would love for you to share just a little bit of word of encouragement for that woman out there who's feeling like she is boring, her life is boring, she lacks calling, maybe she's ordinary and burned out and depressed too. What can you leave with her today?
I think the first thing I could say is you're not alone. I'm there with you a lot of the times too. For me, especially transitioning from a life I only had ever known and then coming my whole life changing, it's been hard. And there's times I'm like, God, I already decided I was gonna be a pastor's wife. That was my identity, which should have been in Christ. So I can relate. I can relate to that feeling. And I still struggle at times too. And here's the thing, there's beauty and there's something powerful in the ordinary days. Don't despise your ordinary. Um, I think perfect is boring. There is beauty in imperfection. Your life, your story is your story, all the parts of it. And, you are living like it's like we're in this moment and it's like we can choose to say, hey, you know, this is my story. This is what God's given me. And I think it's our perspective, just shifting our perspective because there's days I wake up and I feel like the most ordinary, most God, I'm not doing anything. I'm not impacting anybody. I'm not, I went from being this pastor's wife and people needed me and I loved that to now I'm like, what am I now? I know what my husband does. What do I do now? What and so I definitely relate to that. Just keep going. one day, putting one foot in front of the other, and just knowing that if your story's not good, then your story's not over. God is a good guy, and he writes the best stories. So, just let him write your story, and know that, it's going to be good. He works all things together for our good. And just know that every other woman out there, even the most pretty, you think got it all together woman out there struggles with the same thing. Feeling ordinary, feeling burnout, feeling like they're not making a difference as a mom or a wife, as a coworker, or we all struggle, and that's something that should bind us together, and maybe reach out to a lady, and just give her some encouragement today. And, I think when we're struggling, that's what I like to do. Reach out when I'm struggling with feeling that way, reach out to someone and maybe encourage another lady, and then watch what God will do for you.
That is perfect advice. I love that, what you said. If your story's not good, that means it's not over. That
Sure.
that is a mic drop moment. I love that. Well, Brooke, thank you so much for joining me
Thank
today. I just
you.
want to remind everybody to grab your book, Every Little Win. This is what the cover looks like, has you and your husband on it. People can kind of fill in all the blanks, and you gave us a lot of
There's
teasers
a
today.
lot
This is an
more in that
amazing,
book.
there's a lot more in this book. It's amazing. So, Brooke, thank you so much for joining
Thank
me, and
you.
I look forward to part two.
Yes.
Thank you for joining Brooke and me for this episode of the Juggling Life Finding Balance podcast. Be sure to like this episode and give us some love in the comments. And stay tuned for part two, where Brooke shares intimate details of her family's journey to The Voice and how her husband Todd became the season 18 winner. Until then, be blessed and stay balanced.